Okay, I'll run through this quickly. So this is the December 18th, 2023 meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. We're calling the meeting to order, and just to remind everyone, the meeting is being recorded. We subsequently post the recordings on on our website page. I'm sorry, on our YouTube channel, so you can find them there. And I'll try to go ahead and also get these posted in next week's email. Um, Normally under announcements, we normally announce public meetings or upcoming public hearings, but there's nothing of note that I saw coming up. If there's anything, we'll get that out in a future email to you. We have no guest speakers tonight, and for current business, we'll be talking about the zoning regulation rewrite. Most of you know, or some of you may not know that, hang on here, I'm just trying to see if people need to come into the room here. Many of you know, or some of you may not know, that the zoning regulations rewrite was unanimously approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission last Wednesday on the 13th. And so we'll have a little bit of discussion on that tonight and talk about the next steps. Also want to, if time permits at the end, I want to talk a little bit about ENNA's future going into 2024 and beyond. Get some feedback from the folks who are on here in terms of if you'd like to see the organization continue and in what role as well. And then in line with that, going forward, we would still be looking to get some volunteers to form some ad hoc committees that can kind of take the burden of the load of following specific city agenda items. And we can talk a little bit about that later. And then again, we'll still have open discussion and Q&A. And at the end, I do want to talk about our next regular meetings. Typically, our January and February meetings end up falling on two holidays. Dr. Martin Luther King holiday in January, and then President's Day in February. So just want to get some feedback, and we can do that offline as well, about whether you'd like to suspend meetings in January, February, or move them off of the holiday dates. Okay, so basically, I just wanted to give you some highlights of what transpired last week, or maybe in the past 2 weeks, in terms of the zoning regulation rewrite. So on December 5th and 6th, the city's Planning and Zoning Commission held 2 public hearings so that they could hear from the public in terms of feedback, concerns, suggestions, etc. And then they had scheduled for the following week, December 13th and 14th, for the Zoning Commission to actually review all of the requests, the modifications, the requests for modifications that had come in the prior month, to talk about these, and then to ultimately either make some changes and or approve the zoning reg rewrite. On December 13th, they actually didn't need the second night meeting. They went through all of the deliberations for several hours on the 13th. They also had an attorney in attendance who was advising them on procedure and what types of things that they might not want to consider changing that would actually send the whole regulations back to the drawing board. That's just an interesting side note there. But basically what happened on the 13th was that they had a number of deliberations over the feedback that they had from the public, and subsequently unanimously approved the zoning regulations with just a couple of modifications in there. One of the things that ENNA urges you to do is to use the interactive zoning map that's posted on the city's website, and to also use the tables that are called the use tables to review your own parcel and street, so that you could see exactly what that map was that's dated 11/1, and you can understand what the zoning commission was deliberating and what they ultimately approved. There were a couple of changes that happened during the meeting, mostly related to land uses, things such as vape stores for vaping. Um, and there were a couple of other changes as well. But at this point, you should be using the interactive zoning map that's posted and the use tables. As a refresher, you can find these on the city website at norwalkct.gov. And then you go to planning and zoning. You go to zoning regulation update. And that's the link where you'll find all the documents, all the memos, um, all of the deliberations that went on since from April through November, and then subsequently what was approved. If you need help, we suggest that you reach out either directly to Planning and Zoning Director Steve Kleppin, or you can email us, ENNA, for some assistance, but that would be as my schedule, permits for me to be able to hop online and help some folks through that. And I'll remind people of the email addresses again at the end. One of the things that hang on one second. Just want to make sure there's no one else in the waiting room there. Okay. One of the things that I wanted to share with you tonight is that many of the changes that were requested by ENNA on behalf of our community ended up not being recommended by staff to the commission, and therefore they weren't approved. And I think it's important for you guys to know these. There were some things that we had requested that did go through, that weren't nearly as significant as the ones that we wanted that ultimately didn't make it. And for example, we wanted to make sure that the city still required special permits for increased building heights of 3.5 stories. And in particular, this would be for the EVTZ corridor, which is East Avenue Village Transit Zone. And that runs on East Avenue from I-95 to Cemetery Street. When that zoning was originally approved, a building developer who wanted to come in to build, if they wanted to do 3.5 stories, they would have to apply for a special permit, which would then require a special review of 13 considerations, and it would also require a public hearing. For some reason, Steve Kleppin and the commission decided to make the 3.5 stories as of right, meaning there's no special consideration for it. If it meets the zoning regulation specifications, it would be approved with no public hearing. We're not sure why that's being done, especially as he indicated that he's not, that they wouldn't be able to do any added density by adding in more residential units without getting a special permit. So we're not quite sure though why someone would add additional height if the purpose isn't to have additional units for additional revenue. So a little bit confusing on there, and I think the story on that will remain to be told as we see these applications come in. Another thing that we look for is to revise that corridor to include only the East Avenue parcels that front onto East Avenue, and to exclude all the side streets that were originally included in the EVTZ corridor. For example, parcels that go into Fitch, Fort Point, Winfield, Rowan, and Van Zant. And we had requested that when this zone actually first was approved. And we thought it was a great opportunity while the city was reviewing the zoning regulations as a whole to have an opportunity to go back and correct this. And this also was not considered by the zoning commission. We also wanted to remove some of the meaningless and cheaper public amenity bonus points from the zone. These are the bonus points that a developer can accumulate by providing different so-called public amenities that allow them to have buildings of greater height and density, and other benefits as well. Now, some of them did end up getting removed, but nothing to the extent that would impact, whoops, hang on one second, that would impact the mitigation of development along East Avenue. We also had asked them to completely revise the total threshold of the bonus points so that it would be harder to make the threshold higher in total of those points, again, as a means of mitigating overdevelopment. But staff recommended not doing that, and the commission did not override that. So as of today, the EVTZ total point allotment to gain the greatest height and density still exists the way that you saw it back in the beginning of this year. Another example is that we asked them specifically to modify the city's requirement for public notification whenever there is a land use application or zoning amendments. And these are things like, for example, One Cemetery Street at Wells Fargo and Mill Pond. Under our scenario, that parcel would have had to have had a large placard put on it as soon as the application went into planning and zoning. There would have also been, we would have asked for mailings to be done to more than just the adjoining and abutting neighbors. In addition to that, to have notifications go into the local newspaper, and in some cases to have postcards mailed out as well. So the reason we want this is because generally the city and developers only follow the requirements for public notification to the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. And what ends up happening with that is that they do the absolute bare minimum. And I don't have to tell you folks that are on here, I can see who's here. I don't have to tell you that complying with just the letter of the law doesn't really cut it. It's not an effective means of people knowing what applications and zoning amendments are going to be happening right in their own neighborhood until it's too late. What Mr. Kleppin did recommend to the zoning commission and what they did approve was to have placards and other notifications that would be required to be posted, but not until the time that a public hearing is scheduled. And I guess, again, another thing that I really don't have to tell you folks is that with these types of applications, by the time a public hearing is scheduled, it's essentially, the process is essentially over. It's already been reviewed a multitude of times by the zoning commission. Staff has already been working hand in hand with the developers to refine the application to be sure that it complies with specifications and that it would comply with permits that would be approved. So ENNA is still going to continue to push for more robust, timely, and effective communication so that residents are informed earlier in the process and with enough information that's clear and easy to understand about what the application is and who they can reach out to get more information about it. Okay, so what now? People want to know. It was technically approved last Wednesday on the 13th. However, the statutes require that the commission publish a legal notice of their approval in the Norwalk Hour. And I heard from Steve today that he expects that legal notice will go in this week. The reason why it's important for us to understand that is that once the legal notice is published, that's the time that the statutory time clock starts ticking for anyone who might want to file an appeal to either the approval as a whole or some portion of what got approved. Bear in mind that the time window to file an appeal is very short. It's technically 15 calendar days from the date that it gets posted. And so if this notice gets posted or published, I should say, in the Norwalk Hour tomorrow, you would count 15 days from tomorrow, and that would be the deadline. Just a brief primer here on appealing. Anyone who considers themselves a possible appellant must ultimately prove that they have legal standing. It can't just be anyone in the city or state who says, I oppose to these changes. Legal standing generally means that you personally would be aggrieved in some manner by the zoning change. The city must be served with the notice of your intend to appeal within that 15-day period. And but it's important to note that you don't have to have your complete appeal case ready at that time. And then obviously, anyone who's considering this for any reason, you and your neighbors, we highly recommend that you can contact a land use and zoning attorney, because the appeal itself is a legal appeal. It doesn't go through a city body. It actually goes through the court system. It becomes a legal matter through the courts. And the actual drafting and presentation of the basis for your appeal and presenting your case would be done by hopefully a very qualified attorney. So that's the type of thing that, and I've already spoken to a couple of residents regarding this who are considering it. But because of this time clock, it is something that needs to be considered now. And then in terms of being aggrieved, I think the types of things that get taken into account would be your proximity to any parcel that's being rezoned, or your own parcel that's typically adjoining, abutting, or within 100 feet of the parcel. And aggrieved in terms of an example would be if there's any degradation in your quality of life that's directly impacted by the change, or changes to your property value. If there's any restrictive future use on your property that was imposed as a result of these zoning changes. And I think to some extent, if your property and structure has suddenly become non-conforming under the approved zoning. And I did put a question mark there because I'm personally not sure of how that actually works. Okay, so just a couple more things on this. The question is it possible for the Planning and Zoning Commission to actually continue to modify the new regulations? And if so, how and when would that happen? Would it require hiring a lawyer, or could staff simply apply for the changes? Hiring a lawyer meaning someone, through the commission, actually, that would be. And then which would be required as minor, or which changes could be considered minor and which could be considered major, possibly requiring legal notice and more public hearings. It's my understanding that if during the final writing of the zoning regulations as approved, before they get posted to the city website, there'll be a cleanup of anything that might be misworded or typos, for example. And it's my understanding that those would be considered minor changes, and so nothing would kind of send that back to the drawing board. But if there was something coming through the Planning and Zoning Commission, either through themselves or staff or a member of the public, that would be considered a major change, then it's my understanding from Steve Kleppin, then that would actually have to start the process all over again. It would require proper legal notice and additional public hearings and a vote. I happen to have a meeting scheduled with Steve Kleppin this Wednesday to talk about a few things. And one of the items on the agenda is to get some information on exactly when the final zoning regs and maps will be posted, and to talk to him a little bit more about how these ongoing modifications might happen, if at all. The other thing to be aware of that I didn't have on this page here is that even though all these changes were approved last Wednesday on December 13th, there is a lag in the time from the time they get approved to the time the legal notice goes in to the time that the final cleaned up documents are posted on the city website. And and for staff to modify everything they need to update their regulations for new applications coming in. So the actual changes, everything that's in these new zoning regulations, don't go into effect until February 19th of 2024. Should an applicant come in today with a new application to do anything with their property, or development, or any zoning application, if they were to apply today, it would be under the existing old zoning regulations. If they come in and file an application on or after February 19th of 2024, then it would be considered under all of the new zoning regulations and reviewed as such. If you have specific questions about your property, especially, and this is super confusing, guys, we get it. I'm super confused. The every zoning commission meeting I watch, I can see that they're actually still super confused, even though they voted on this Wednesday night to approve it. But especially if you have questions, especially about what's allowed now, what is going to change in the future, then we do urge you to reach out to zoning staff and get your questions answered and any of your concerns addressed. And at this point, we do recommend for everyone's benefit that you do that in writing. And as always, you would send those inquiries directly into the Planning and Zoning Director, Steve Kleppin, and he can be reached at skleppin@norwalkct.gov. Okay. So if you have questions, comments, suggestions, anything right now, if you can raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised yet. But I'll try to keep an eye out. You can also throw something into chat, but I tend not to be able to walk and chew gum, so it's hard for me to watch the chat and then see if if anybody's hand goes up. But at this point too, you should be able to unmute yourself. So if you want to just jump in.
Hi,
And then I may
Diane.
actually call on someone here too. I wanted to see if we have a little bit of time to talk about these, the new tax reval. We'll see if anybody has any questions on that, but we may have to have a special meeting on that.
Diane, I have a question.
Okay, and who?
This is Emily Hayden. I talked to you
Hi,
the other day.
Emily. Hi, nice to meet you on
Nice
Zoom.
to meet you too. So if we did want to start this appeal process, even if we just notified the commission, do we need a lawyer to notify them? Or can I send, Steve an email?
Yep,
I have reached out to some lawyers. I'm still kind of looking into it and trying to, you know, find someone who might do it pro bono or try to figure something out. But
gotcha. Yep.
um,
Yeah, so the notification would actually, the city would actually have to be served with the
by a
notice
lawyer.
of the intent. That's typically done, by an attorney and then a constable or someone. But I believe that you can actually, that the average citizen can actually do this themselves through the court system and
Okay.
going through the court and filing the paperwork, because you're not actually filing the appeal. The
Right.
initial step of that is simply notifying the city of the intent to appeal, and then you just give a very brief, this is why, this is the egregious, this is who's filing it, and they get noticed of it, and that's what starts the process. But you may be able to do that through the courthouse yourself. I'd have to take a look at that.
Okay.
For the
Right.
actual
Yeah.
appeal, though, as soon
Right.
as you do that, the main effort would absolutely to be able to find a land use and
Sure.
zoning attorney. And there are a few that would possibly consider it, because it's not, a lot of land use and zoning attorneys don't take what they call opposition work, because they mostly represent developers and property owners who are applying for things. And so they
Hmm.
don't work on the opposite side of the fence. But having said that, there are a number of attorneys who do opposition work, and they tend to be kind of overloaded because there's not that many of them. And of
Okay.
the ones who do opposition work, you have to first, and they'll let you know this, you would have to first discern whether or not they have any conflict of interest in doing this. For example, if they do any work for the city of Norwalk,
Hmm.
or if they represent, for example, any of the property owners who may be part of the group that's appealing, but they would let you know that in advance.
Okay. So if worse comes to worse, I could find a lawyer, maybe was not a planning and zoning expert that
Mhm.
could still possibly work.
Yes, in terms of that initial first step, for sure.
Hmm.
For the actual appeal itself, because this is so technical, you'd probably really want to hone in on a land use and
Hmm.
property attorney. I started thinking of a couple that I think might actually be interested in this, that they'd want to take it on from an interest point of view.
Hmm.
Sometimes they say, look, I normally won't have time and I really can't do this, but this is so interesting that I can get the process started. And a lot of times they'll just assign someone more junior in their office to do like all the legwork on it.
Right.
And if it is something that ultimately goes to court, then you'd have the attorneys actually representing you. Um, and that was just today, Emily. I have your email, obviously, because you're on the ENNA list, and I can send you the names of a couple of them if you want to go ahead and reach out and just give them
Yep.
the overview and see if they're interested.
Yeah, please do that.
Okay. Okay, anything else on this so far? The other thing that I wanted to do is if because we are a small group tonight, if there is anyone on this Zoom tonight that you want me to bring up the map and bring up your actual parcel to take a look at it, we should have time to do that. And again, because we're a small group, I'd like more people on, but the benefit of just a handful of us is that we can really spend a little bit more time on specific questions. And I also will say, and I'll just mention this briefly because I see a couple of different names here. Um, Today we discovered some confusion over Cottage Street itself in terms of the multiple map changes that were done since the time the first regulations came out in April. And it looks like I was cycling through two different memos and two different map changes. And the most current map that's on the city's website dated 11/1 appears to be different or doesn't jive with what one of the memos said and what we think Steve Kleppin articulated to the commission. So one of the things that I'll be doing, and I've already sent an email to Steve Kleppin actually tonight, asking for clarification on that. So if you are someone who lives on or near Cottage Street and that's one of your concerns, we are working on that. And I'm also encouraging residents to also send emails into Steve Kleppin and get a definitive answer on exactly what went to the commission and exactly what they did propose. Because one of the things that's kind of funky with Cottage Street is that it actually splits between, um, at least on two of the maps, it actually splits between two zones on Cottage Street. And it's something that I hadn't realized that the last time that I looked at that map, that there was still a split where that road curves. So definitely need some more clarification on that. Okay, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, and I'll send this out in an email too, because we're a small group, is we need to um, start looking ahead to 2024 at this point. And I'd like people to consider, first of all, should ENNA continue in the role and our mission statement, basically as we have for all these years at this point, as a kind of a quality of life and community preservation advocacy group. Some of you are probably aware that there are other formal neighborhood associations and informal ones that really act more as kind of feel-good organizations with neighborhood events and getting neighbors together to do different things that are more feel-good but not advocacy work. So like to get you to just think about what you think the role of ENNA should be going into the next 10 years or 12 years of this from where we've been. Um, also, if residents don't want to have guest speakers periodically, and which topics would interest you. We really, in the past, would get very good turnouts when we have guest speakers from City Hall, because when you think about it, every department at City Hall has either a direct or indirect impact on both your quality of life and your property values and taxes and the like. So folks are normally interested in getting different department heads to come in and we cycle through them. But for example, if there's a department you're specifically interested in hearing from, you can send that in to us. I don't think we've had recreation and parks in a while. It may be a good time to start getting some of the finance folks in, and so some of the other city agencies that impact us. We also would be open to having guest speakers on, a variety of different topics. If you're interested in the environment, or if you're interested in, any other topic, please send it in to us, and we'll take a look at having some more guest speakers in 2024. In the past, for a while, what we were doing is having a guest speaker every other meeting, and that seemed to work out pretty good. And then I don't really want to harp on this, but to really be effective as a really productive neighborhood association, we're still looking to recruit board members. We desperately need board members, and we really are trying to have as diverse a board as we possibly can. And we really need volunteers from each area in 06855. If you look really just within our little, kind of seaside community here, if you go within the different pockets of neighborhoods, you can see that even within East Norwalk, it's very diverse in terms of the demographics and the socioeconomics behind it, architecture and layout and property sizes and amenities and things. So it would be helpful to have volunteers from each area within 06855. It's beneficial to us as an organization, but also to the community, so that we know that people feel represented and we can share our ideas and be more productive. We did still have some folks who had reached out to us in the midst of all of this planning and zoning debacle going on, and who did show interest. And regrettably, it's kind of a catch-22 where we really need, we don't have time to do everything. We need people to help, but then we didn't really have the time to get back to the folks who did reach out and try to have, kind of a transition period to bring more people in. But now that we're beyond the zoning regulations and there's nothing massive on the horizon for January, we'd like to get back into that. And I guess the point here is that ENNA has always been a very relevant organization in Norwalk. We're a 501c3. We have anyone who lives in 06855 is a member by virtue, but we do have really good community participation, and like to see us be more productive going forward. The past few years, we've been dealing with so many zoning issues that it's just been basically whack-a-mole for us every time we come up for air to try to be proactive and more positive about the changes that we want to impact in the community. Some other, kind of drastic change is thrust upon us, and we have to stop what we're doing and deal with that. So if you have let me see if anybody's hand is raised here. If you have any ideas on this topic here about ENNA going forward, what your thoughts are, any comments on what you'd like to see the organization continue to do, what you'd like to see us not continue to do, what changes you'd like to see going forward.
This is JJ. I'll just speak because there's only 12 of us and I'm the only one with my hand up. So anyway, this is JJ. Many of us are involved with different businesses and different, pursuits in life. And Diane, to your credit, you're really good at this. And, you swim in this pool every day, whether you like it or not. So I apologize if this sounds a little off, but do we have like a scorecard of how much, in the last several years that our community advocacy and preservation has been needed? Like, how successful has it been? No offense, that might be a hard conversation to have, but Like, what are we doing that's actually getting results? And maybe we can build on that. Thank you.
Great, actually great question. And so actually a couple of years ago, we had started doing kind of like a year-end recap and of the projects that we took on, initiatives that we started, things that we interacted with the city that we were able to impact some change on, and then just didn't have the time to continue to do it. But JJ, that would definitely be something that I would want to make sure that we're doing again, so that we're comparing like what are our goals, and this is why I want to have the conversation now, kind of like what are our goals for 2024 and going forward, and then making sure that our actions are actually aligning with that, and then we can have a scorecard going forward of how we're doing, for lack of a better term, but it is the way to look at it. Maybe even create a dashboard as well, that highlights the different areas that we get involved in, and then be able to report back on some of our successes. It's interesting that you bring that up. There's a great former board member, I don't think she's on tonight, Roberta Di Basegli, but I remember one time at a board meeting saying something like, and again, this was a few years ago, and just saying, really getting the sense like we didn't really accomplish all that much this year. And it was kind of funny because Roberta and someone else said it like, are you crazy? And then we started actually doing the list. And when we went to do the recap, sorry about that, hang on, my cat is about to jump over to us. Okay. When we actually started doing the recap and we went through the meetings and everything, we actually had a real, a number of successes and a number of new initiatives that we started. And it was, it really was a good exercise to go through. And I think it's a good exercise, JJ, from two points of view. One, if we're falling short of things that are, positive and that we want to be doing and productive, we need to know that, and we kind of need to know it, sooner so that we can course correct, but also so that we don't feel like, gosh, we just spent a whole another year just dealing with so many negative issues and not being, you win some, you lose some. And we definitely understand that. And we know that that's going to happen, but it's a tough pill to swallow when you get to the end of the year and you kind of feel like you lost more than you won. And then if you don't have the people and the time and the initiative to kind of do postmortems on that, to say, well, why didn't that work? Or why did something work and how do we replicate that? So, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you're volunteering to help with that, we would love that.
I'd be happy to help with that. I just,
you faded out there a little bit. Say it again, JJ.
Oh, sorry. I said I'd be happy to help with that. I just, there must be some data that would help us evaluate that. And I'm not, I could probably count on one hand the things that I'm aware of that ENNA has done. Again, no offense. May I also add that, this is a delicate thing to say, it seems, but when you're working against us, along with, hopefully, but also sometimes against a system like a zoning board, in a city like Norwalk, I mean, we want to do things that are effective, but sometimes we have to select what those are, because there are certain things that are just going to be a stone wall. They're just not going to change. And I know nationally, certainly nationally, but globally also, there's plenty of small cities having conversations about rezoning and, density and how to solve housing crises and this kind of thing. So, Norwalk isn't really very different when it comes to what we all sort of need to come to terms with. Responsible rezoning is great. Like I'm on board with all that, but I just, if certain people in the zoning office or certain procedures that just aren't going to be receptive to the kinds of things that we want to do, then maybe we choose our battles in a way. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I don't mean, there are people in this group even right now in this meeting that like are going to be severely impacted by these changes, and I I feel for you. I'm ready to, stand in the street with the sign with you. And at the same time, I also think that we have to choose what we're going to be most effective at. Because we can't be effective at everything when, this
Yeah,
is,
yeah, I agree with that, and I think that comes down to, it's another reason why we really need to get more board members on target too, so that there's more input in terms to, what are the things that we're going to look to tackle, what are the things that are the most meaningful that we can have the most impact on, and I think one of the things that I'd like to see is that, due to the nature of these type of whack-a-mole things that I was talking about a minute ago, I think that there's been a deterioration in recent years of our relationship with City Hall. And that is really disheartening to me. And I think that one of our goals should get back to, having a really good working relationship with people at City Hall and with our elected council people as well, within the district too, that we need to get back to that, because there's been so much of this us against them that it has eroded the actual relationship. In the past, and I see a former councilman was on here, so he can probably attest to this if Rich is still on here, but in the past, the way these things work is that you would work together, you'd make your best case for something, and if it didn't go your way, either through zoning or something that came before the common council, you just said, look, they had your information, and they voted in a way that that meant something to them, and you have to respect that. And in the past, we would all walk away and say, okay, you respect it. I'm not looking for you to agree with me. Mostly what happens with ENNA and the other associations is that we're simply looking for people in government to make informed decisions. And if they were informed and they came to a different conclusion than we did, we always respected that. And the old story I would tell is that, if they voted against the neighborhood groups at Common Council, we all still felt like we could, go out and have pizza and a beer afterwards, and everyone would be, respectful and have a good time, and then you meet up again. But I think that in, the past 6 to 8 years, or maybe longer now, a lot of that has eroded, and that certainly impacts moving forward with what JJ was just talking about.
well, that's to be continued. That just, what, to me, what we just opened up is something that needs to be developed in terms of what's working, what's not working, what the road forward looks like, put it down in a document, that we can all have access to. So I can help.
Okay. Thanks, JJ. I appreciate that. And if you
Diane?
can just shoot me a quick email as such too, that would be great. Just into the main email box, info@eastnorwalk.org.
Okay.
Okay.
Diane?
Hey, Rich, thanks. I wasn't going to call you out there, but thanks for jumping in.
No, you know what? For some reason, the raise your hand thing isn't on the bottom of my thing. And I don't know if it's me or the way I signed in or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes
so-
it's in different places.
Yeah.
Hang on, I got to adjust my sound here. Okay.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for all you do and keeping the people informed as best we can. All right. And through this whole process, I've been a councilman, and like you said, it was, hey, tomorrow's another issue. So you don't want to burn the bridge, and you keep the dialogue open anyway, even if you didn't get your way. Okay. I've been through that a lot. I gotta tell you, with this Zoom, and it has put people out of touch. Your elected officials are farther away from their constituents than they've been in a long time. Okay. And I noticed that, see, as most people are aware, in the beginning, when your term first starts, your committee chairs, including the full council and every other board and body, has to send up to the state of Connecticut when their regular meetings are. Okay.
Mhm.
We're going to meet every third Tuesday, and it's going to be in City Hall in probably this room. You probably change the room if you put a sign, but anything else is called a special meeting. You have to, it gets filed with the state of Connecticut. Okay. And I noticed that, well, I saw it on Nancy on Norwalk because she posted it, that every committee meeting on the Common Council is going to be on Zoom, right?
Mhm.
They're not going to have any in-person meetings,
Mhm.
which, come on, they don't see you. They don't have to look
Yeah.
at you. You don't
Yeah,
know when you don't know when your turn is, and you
Mhm.
don't know if there's 10 people ahead of you. And so you just kind of like give up, especially like budget time or something like that. You don't know how many people are ahead of you.
Mhm.
And after hearing the same thing over and over, you just bail out after like an hour because you don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to like thank you for this, and somehow my hand raising wasn't there. I did want to bring up another point when you're saying appeals and all that kind of thing. There is one other. The the citizens have the right of referendum. All
Mhm.
right, on not just common council things, but on almost every board and commission that's out there. You got so many days you got to put a petition in, you got to get signatures, and in the end, it won't matter because you need so many percentages of the voters to show up for it to even count. So that's why it's never used. You'd have to like do it like to time it that it could be on an election day or something like that, and hope enough people turned out. But you can overturn by referendum any action almost on any board, but
Yeah.
it's impossible to make the threshold. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thanks, Rich. I'm not quite sure how it works with zoning, but it's interesting because one of the things that could have happened is there could have been a referendum in the summer that could have been done, especially since it's a municipal year, that would have had the question on the ballot about whether the zoning regulations should be updated. Um, and there could be other referendums as well. It could have been done the same way with the charter. And so, yeah, the threshold is a little bit high, but I still think it's a valuable tool for when it's really, I think it's got to be absolutely necessary. I probably would have seen it absolutely necessary as a zoning thing, except I think with the zoning rewrite, I really wasn't a proponent of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, if that's the right expression, because there were a lot of aspects of the zoning regulations that actually cleaned up a bunch of stuff that was confusing, stuff that wasn't, um, the same between the neighborhoods. A lot of things with shall and may, and so cleaning up all of that, I think was really worthwhile to do that. It's when they started to kind of delve into the whole thing then about turning the regulations into a means of achieving another goal of increasing the population and allowing for different types of developments in different areas. If it had just really been the goal of the POCD to which originally was to mostly clean it up. So it is unfortunate. It was a tough decision because I personally didn't feel like we really should throw all of it out because there was a lot of good stuff in there, but some of the not so good stuff that did make it in, and that I guess a compelling enough argument wasn't made to the commission to change it is unfortunate. And now it is super hard to go back and try to get any of this change. In fact, the lawyer, Emily, you may find this interesting. The lawyer who did sit through the deliberations and advise the commission, um, basically we spent a little bit of time talking about how hard it is to do appeals. The threshold is pretty tough. He was definitely talking about things like special permits, but these types of decisions where they're very well documented and where staff has all their ducks in a row about what exactly was presented to the commission, all the meetings they had with the public, etc. It is an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. And I still think that a case can be made in some of these streets and areas and uses to just say like, this doesn't sound like a very good decision, and maybe even you could maybe make a case that the commissioners didn't really even understand themselves what the implications were of approving it.
So on that note, I was at the Chamber of Commerce holiday party taking photos. That's what I do. But I actually had attorneys coming up to me who you and I and others have spoken against their projects. They're coming up to me going like, I can't believe what they did at the last minute. Right.
Yeah.
And just eliminate all parking requirements in downtown Norwalk, in South Norwalk, and I don't know where else or how. I didn't get the details on it, but like, I'm not going to throw their names out there, but these are attorneys that we fight their projects. And I got them coming up to me going, Richard, you can't believe what they passed at the last minute for like 3 bicycle guys who say it's impossible for them to buy a condo or rent an apartment. And so if you just eliminate the parking requirements, then the developer doesn't have to pay for the parking that's going to cost them. And I'm thinking, and we're all thinking the same thing, like, well, where are you going to put your car?
Right.
That's just a little side note on there.
Yeah, that was interesting. And actually, thanks for reminding me, because that was the other big one. Of course, I always forget the big ones. Was at the very last minute of this, it was either complete elimination or virtual elimination of the minimum parking requirements in those areas. And it's interesting. Although I did notice that staff never corrected them to say that where you have a building that simply physically cannot provide the parking, for example, like Washington Street, where if they go from a use that requires more parking, but you can't physically do it, there used to be the option to do something called fee in lieu of parking. And then there would be dollars that were provided to the city, so that then the other maintenance of parking for on street elsewhere and garages then I guess would be partially funded. But interesting that staff didn't raise their hand and say, oh no, we have another mechanism to accommodate those folks. They just said, oh yeah, we'll take away parking. It was more than bizarre. It was bizarre.
Thank you. Anyway, thanks for all you do. Like, go ahead. I don't want to slow down your meeting there.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Good to see you. Okay, I don't see any other hands up right now and nothing in chat. So let's just jump ahead here right now. And then we can open it up to anything else somebody wants to talk about too. We're right at 8 o'clock now. Just a quick update here. If we can get some feedback on the January and February meetings. In the past, we did hold our meetings anyway on Martin Luther King Day and President's Day, but we know that that there's a lot of observances of those, and people are away, and holidays and long weekends and things. I'd rather not have a meeting in January and February. I'd rather have it, but if you can give us some feedback if we move it a week before or a week after, if that would make some sense to people. Okay. Let me just do stop share. Okay. So if you need to drop off, go ahead and feel drop off. We don't take it personal. But I'm happy to stay on. As I've said in the past, I'll stay on as late as possible if people have questions or suggestions or anything they want to discuss or bring up with everybody that's on here. If anybody wants to discuss the tax revaluations, if you haven't opened your tax reval letter already, by the way, be careful with that. It looked like some sort of a solicitation that you would also that you'd be inclined to throw out in the mail. So I did advise some people who hadn't received them to contact the city, because they may have tossed it inadvertently. But when you go to open the envelope, I know in my case, I wish I'd had a defibrillator thing here. just incredible increases in the appraised values, and that of course then all ultimately equates to the 70% assessed value, and then that will ultimately equate to the setting of the mill rate. An interesting thing with that that I think reading on social media, I don't think a lot of folks understood that by the time the mill rate is set, that correlates to the grand list and the property values. That doesn't happen until the spring into early summer. And at that time, all of the options for the public to appeal their tax assessment have long passed. The time clock for the tax assessment appeals actually starts now with preliminary appointments that must be booked, I think, by this Friday, and then scheduling appointments with the tax board of appeals that go through, I want to say, February. So the window of time to do all of this is very short, and it happens well in advance of the mill rate. So if you've reviewed your tax reval and it looks to be completely out of whack in terms of what you would have expected, knowing I think everyone realizes that property values have soared in Norwalk, and it did start as part of the anomaly of the pandemic. But according to the professional assessors who actually do the reval, they say once you get beyond the first couple of years of that, they don't consider it an anomaly anymore. They simply consider it that this is now what the market is. And what ends up happening then, I believe, is that in the next couple of years, if prices were to drop dramatically, because the demand that was created under this kind of artificial boom here, when that actually goes down, there isn't any adjustment at that point until the next revaluation. So now is a good time for you to review those and file any appeals. I don't, one of the things that we should look into, but it seems to me that you can't file an appeal of the taxes based on anything that's new in the zoning regulation that's about to affect you. So for example, you can't say, I think I should get an abatement because now I'm non-conforming, or now before I could do this with my property and now I can't do it. I don't believe you can do that because the property valuations were set as of October 1st. And that's the date of, when they actually set it versus the new zoning regulations. But someone may know different than that, or you can certainly call the city and find out. So with that, I would say happy holidays to you folks for now, and Merry Christmas and happy and healthy New Year. We'll be in touch via email. If you have neighbors that you don't think are on the email list, it's good to go ahead and try to urge them to do that. Otherwise, a lot of the communication will fall to you, and you shouldn't have to do that. So just have them sign up for the email list at info@eastnorwalk.org or on our website at eastnorwalk.org. And that's the best way to reach us. And again, for communications on zoning, I think it's a really good idea to get your questions in writing, and also to get your answers back in writing at this point. And that would be to P&Z Director Steve Kleppin, S. Kleppin, Kleppin, at norwalkct.gov. If you're compelled to want to send communications into the Planning and Zoning Commission, you are welcome to do that, even though this particular case is closed, but you can't communicate directly with the P&Z commissioners. That communication goes through Mr. Kleppin as well, and then staff provides it to all the members of the commission. One last thing too, and I'll get this in an email this week. Let me just make a note. I believe that there is going to be still one vacancy on the Planning and Zoning Commission. it's a commission that impacts so much of our quality of life here. And I noticed that we are short of having representation from 06855. So if anyone on the meeting tonight, yourselves, or you know of any neighbor that may have the desire and the time to volunteer to be appointed to planning and zoning, I think it would be a great thing to have more representation here from East Norwalk. And also, I'll go ahead and post the all the openings for the boards, commissions, and agencies, etc. So if you have an interest in any of the topics that those groups control, then you can submit your interest to the mayor's office, and along with a resume and why you would like to serve. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for hopping on. We'll see you via email, and we'll see you next month.